Hi guys, it's me, HD, and welcome to qualifying day for the Australian Grand Prix weekend in Melbourne at Albert Park. And I hope you guys are well. Of course, here for us Europeans, it is very, very early in the morning, 3:30 a.m. where I'm at in the UK. And even though it is very early, it looks like we've got a pretty good qualifying session coming up. We've got probably a good fight for pole position between Red Bull and Ferrari by the looks of it from the practice sessions. And then a pretty competitive fight after that with, Mercedes, McLaren, Aston Martin, and obviously the midfield, as usual, pretty close. So, despite it being a very early, qualifying session, it should be rewarding for us diehard F1 fans. And we should get probably, I'm hoping, this will be the best qualifying session of the season so far. We have had some good qualifying sessions here before. Last year was pretty good. We had even a pretty close top 5, top 6 on the grid, even with Max Verstappen taking pole position. So, yeah, fingers crossed, it should be good. Hope you guys are doing well, no matter what time zone you're in and whatever part of the world you're from. Hope you're all doing well and having as best a time as possible. And yeah, hope you can join me today in firstly building up to and previewing qualifying. And then, of course, we'll get into the actual session itself, which will be beginning in just under 90 minutes from now. Currently at the Albert Park circuit, we have the Formula 2 sprint race. We're on lap 6 of that Formula 2 sprint race. They're about to conclude a safety car period for a very dramatic start involving a big accident straight off the line. And yeah, I'll keep you updated as to who ends up winning that particular sprint race and who ends up on the podium. The most notable thing I saw from qualifying for F2 was that Kimi Antonelli qualified in second place, which of course he'll start for the feature race. Very impressive considering he's literally never driven not only at this track before, but I don't think he's even driven barely outside of Europe before, except for, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, I think other places in the Middle East, but it's not a ton of different tracks from what he's done, in Europe. So incredibly impressive from Antonelli. But what we're going to be doing in this build-up, firstly, to qualifying, is going through the stuff we usually go through. We're going to go through practice 2 yesterday and look at the results of practice 2. Obviously, the conditions in practice 2 yesterday were quite a bit different from what we're seeing currently. It's quite a bit cooler today in Melbourne and windier than it was yesterday, even though it was a bit windy yesterday at the circuit. So, yeah, we're going to go through results of practice 2 because, of course, when practice 2 started yesterday, it will be the same time as when qualifying starts. So we'll look at the data from that session and get into that. We'll go through the sector time data just to see where certain teams are very quick, where certain teams maybe are holding back with their, true performance. And then, of course, I'll get into my predictions for qualifying. Also, let you guys know of some key upgrades for the teams. And we've got a few performance ones, not a massive load of performance upgrades, but some here and there, which I'll get into as well before we get to qualifying. And of course, I will, at some point before we get into it, go through team by team and look at, for each team, how I think they'll do and how they'll get on in this qualifying session coming up. Before, though, I get into it, there is a poll running at the top of the live chat. That poll asking you guys, who do you think will take pole position for the Australian Grand Prix? Will it be Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, or Carlos Sainz? Those are your 3 options. And you've got the next, 2 hours, let's say, pretty much, to decide as to who you think is going to end up on pole position. I will, of course, like I did in Saudi Arabia, and like I've done before, I will finish up that poll and look at the results right before we get into Q3. So you've got, still quite a bit of time to go like I said, a couple hours until you need to have made your final decision. Of course, I'll get into who I think take pole shortly. But let me hide that timer and get into some of the key data from practice 2, which was held in very, very nice conditions. As you can see on your screen, some of the pictures of the cars from yesterday's practice. Let's get into those results. So, the top 10, Charles Leclerc ended up quickest on a 1:17.2, which at the time, I'll be honest, I thought was in a very, very quick time in practice 2. I think even a bit quicker than maybe some of the teams were expecting. But in practice 3, which finished about, an hour, just over an hour ago, I think the best time in that session from Leclerc was a 1:16.6 or a 16.7. Yeah, the pace is a lot hotter this weekend than I was expecting. I thought it would be, in practice 2, I thought they'd be doing probably a 17.5, 17.6 at the absolute best. I didn't think they'd be that low with Leclerc doing a 1:17.2, and I definitely did not expect them to be in the 1 minute 16s in practice 3. So yeah, it's going to be a very quick pole position time, probably a late 1 minute 15, something like that, like a 15.8, 15.9, something. I think around that is probably the best time you'll be able to do in qualifying. Yeah, we'll keep our eyes on that. But yeah, Charles Leclerc was not only quickest, he was 0.4 of a second quicker than the next car of Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. Red Bull, though, overnight seems as though they have they've made some setup changes, let's say, and the car is handling a slight bit better. But Ferrari still look very, very competitive. So it's going to be a really good fight for pole position today. Carlos Sainz in third. Good to see him back in the car. And, I mean, his pace not great in practice 2 compared to his teammate, but it was a lot better in practice 3. He is currently, though, under investigation for a practice start infringement in practice 3. So, see what happens with that. Lance Stroll up in 4th place. I've got to say, Stroll has been very quick this weekend. Don't really know why. I never really thought this track was a great track for him. I mean, he was decently quick here last year, but it was nothing special. So, yeah, I'm not really sure why he was so quick yesterday. And almost, or pretty much, a 10th of a second clear of Fernando Alonso in 5th. Aston Martin once again looking a bit more, or a bit quicker, let's say, than I was expecting, which is something we saw, back in Bahrain and even Saudi Arabia as wow. Just watching the F2. Oh, no. Oh, God. Big crash in the F2 race, guys. Antonelli has been took out going into the one of the final corners. Massive crash. He did dive bomb, though, like 4 cars into turn 11, so that was quite dramatic. Yeah, Aston Martin looking good. Mercedes really not looking good. And if you're a Mercedes fan, you're going to really struggle, I think, in this session coming up in, an hour and 20 minutes time. And all I'll say is brace yourself for the possibility of some embarrassment in terms of the result that Mercedes end up with, because their car really this weekend has not been handling well. It's been off track a few times, just hasn't looked anywhere near as good as really it should be. So yeah, there is definitely the possibility they could end up, a surprise elimination in Q2 or something like that. Definitely is possible. Oscar Piastri in 7th. McLaren, I've got to say, not as quick as I was expecting. I don't know if it's because they're losing just way too much pace in the middle sector, where we know their top speed is a real issue. But yeah, just not as quick, McLaren, for some reason, as I expected. Sergio Perez back in 8th. Not great pace from Perez, but I don't think it was that bad of a session from Perez. Maybe as bad as some people may think. Lando Norris in 9th, not that far away from his teammate. And then Yuki Tsunoda in P10. Racing Bulls looked quite decent yesterday. And then for the rest of the field, you've got Joan 11th, Ricciardo 12th, Logan Sargent 13th. He is no longer in the car because Alex Albon, who you can see down there in 20th, Alex Albon had a massive crash in practice 1, and Williams were sorry, let me start again before I go into a tailspin there. Williams were unable to fix the chassis of Alex Albon's car. And for some reason, I haven't actually seen what the legit reason is for Williams not bringing a spare chassis. But because they don't have one for this Grand Prix, my guess is logistics, because of how far this Grand Prix is from their home base here in the UK. But yeah, because they don't have a spare chassis, they have kicked Logan Sargent out of his Williams, and now Alex Albon is in that car for the rest of the weekend. Lots of people online have been saying how unfair it is. It's not unfair. If Logan Sargent was performing regularly at the same level as Alex Albon, then it would be unfair. But he isn't. Logan Sargent is by far the worst driver in Formula 1. He is regularly a few tenths of a second off the pace of his teammate every single weekend. It is, not unfair at all. If he wanted to have a fair claim that, Williams have treated him unfairly here, then he should just simply be better than he's been. If he was on the same pace as Albon, I don't think the team would have told Logan to get out of the car for Alex Albon. I don't believe that for a second. But as usual, people online crying about it, saying how unfair it is and how wrong it is. Not unfair or wrong at all. People need to stop crying. We know Logan shouldn't even really be in the car. He's not good enough for Formula 1. Williams should have replaced him at the end of, for this season. But he didn't, for whatever reason, and he's in the car for 2024. But at this rate, I don't think Logan is going to be a Williams driver for that much longer. I don't see him in the car at all in 2025. I'd be very surprised if that did happen. So, after Logan Sargent, you've got Valtteri Bottas in 14th, Gasly in 15th, Alpine once again very slow. On the pace of Haas, who are not looking very good, so that's at least decent for them. They're not miles away from, say, the front of the midfield, which is a good thing to see, but still pretty poor. And then you got Hülkenberg 16th, Ocon 17th, Lewis Hamilton down in 18th. He didn't have, though, really a proper session, did Lewis Hamilton. He was testing, I think, an experimental setup that I don't know if it actually went to plan or not. And that's why he ended up in 18th, because they were just doing funny things with his car. Kevin Magnussen, 19th, and then Alex Albon obviously did not do a lap time. I've got to say quickly, with this F2 race, they're now under a safety car. Why have they not red flagged it? There's literally a tractor on the track, and they've not red flagged it. Which, aren't they supposed to do? I think, haven't we already talked about this? That when a tractor or a recovery truck comes onto the track, that should be an automatic red flag. Why the fuck have they not red flagged it? Crazy. Absolute craziness from the stewards. Or not from the stewards, but from the FIA race director. But anyway, that is the results from practice 2. Let's get into the sector time data for practice 2 to see where certain teams were so quick. So sector 1, which is half of it is about corners and half of it is about your straight line speed, let's say, with obviously 2 DRS zones. Ferrari very quick through the first sector, a tenth quicker almost than the next best car of the Mercedes of George Russell and the Aston Martin of Stroll, pretty quick through this sector. Red Bull were a tenth and a half down. I think that was a bit probably because they were saving on power probably a bit more than other teams were, so I don't think they were legitimately that far off in the first sector. But still, they weren't as good as Ferrari. And I think even if they had turned up a bit more to match Ferrari in the first sector, I don't think necessarily they would have ended up being, clearly quicker. but definitely would have been quicker than how they were. And then you got Sauber in 5th. McLaren, surprisingly slow in the first sector. I don't know, again, if it's excessive drag or just not good grip in a couple of those slow corners, turn 3, turn 4. I don't know if it's that. As literally currently seeing on the F2 broadcast, a tractor driving on the track, carrying a car right next to the cars, still running, passing it. Again, totally wrong. I don't know if it's excessive drag or just poor performance in those like slower corners of turn 3 and 4 and that. But yeah, that first sector just nowhere near good enough. Should be at least a tenth of a second better in the first sector. Racing Bulls, decent first sector. Haas probably would have expected to be a tad better. Williams, obviously that's Logan Sargent. So that's not really the legitimate pace of the Williams because it's Logan Sargent in the car. No disrespect. And then you got Alpine at the back. No real surprise about that. And then the middle sector is all about straight line speed because I think except for, what is it? I can't remember the exact corner names. It turns 7, that fast right-hander before you go onto that long stretch, which obviously has a DRS zone, a third DRS zone, I think, for the track. It's all about really straight line speed, and this sector is a really good indicator as to where certain teams are lacking in that aspect. Ferrari and Red Bull at the top, no surprise about that. McLaren, though, third best in the middle sector. So I am wondering, with McLaren, maybe the reason, and you'll see in the final sector in a minute as well, they're not quite performing in that sector as well as you would have expected. Maybe McLaren have had to take a bit of wing off their car to be a bit more competitive in the middle sector. Maybe that's what they've had to do. We'll have to see in qualifying whether that does, they continue with that type of setup or whether they add a bit more wing to it. But that's what it feels like they're doing. And that might be causing their overall pace to not be super strong. And yeah, that is quite, what's the best way to describe it? A bit sad, I would say, with McLaren, because as I've said already this season, through the corners, their car is very good. But still, and I don't know why this has cropped up again after they seemingly fixed it, or not fixed it totally, but they really got a better handle of it last year, the issue with drag. Seems as though it's coming back to bite them, which is really not good. And now it's meaning that, certain tracks they're having to, take a bit of wing off to be a bit more competitive down the straights, which again hurts the cornering performance. But we'll see whether they continue with that for qualifying. Aston Martin then 4th, Mercedes in 5th, Alpine 6th, clearly Alpine going with less swing to be more competitive in this part of the track, because if they were running normal wing, say the same amount of wing as everybody else, they would probably be at the very back. And then you got Haas 7th, Williams 8th, Racing Bulls 9th, and Sauber in 10th. But yeah, I say McLaren and Alpine the most notable parts of that middle sector speed. And then the final sector really is all about downforce. Very nice flow, the final sector. But you really get a good understanding, let's say, of, in terms of grip, who has a lot of it for this track at this Grand Prix weekend. And Ferrari clearly have lots of grip, quite a bit more grip in their car than I expected, because I did not think they would be this competitive in the final sector, a tenth quicker than Red Bull. And even with Red Bull probably running a bit less engine power yesterday, I don't think that would have made that much difference at all in this final sector. So definitely impressive from Ferrari for them to be this competitive. And then a bit of a drop-off to the Aston Martin team, third best. And then another bit of a drop-off to Mercedes, who were 3.5 tenths alone in that final sector slower than Ferrari, which is nowhere near good enough. I mean, if Ferrari have a better car downforce-wise, that's fine. But for Mercedes to be that far off in just the final sector is nowhere near good enough. for them. And that's a big reason, as we've seen so far this season, with the performance in the high-speed corners, which, of course, plenty of them in the final sector. That's a big reason why they perform so poorly this year, because that car is just, I wouldn't say a piss poor effort from the team, but it's not good enough for a team like Mercedes with the quality they've got, the resources, the money, just all the equipment they've got, in terms of simulators, wind tunnel, all of that. It's just nowhere near good enough for the Mercedes works team. And, for them to be at the same pace as well as Racing Bulls, that's, just nowhere near good enough, and only barely quicker than Sauber in the final sector. McLaren, as you can see, only sixth best. And again, I think that might be because of what we just saw, maybe taking a bit too much wing off to be a bit more competitive in that middle sector. And then a big drop off from the top 7 to Hulkenberg and the Haas in 8th. Don't quite know why that is. I would have expected Haas to be a bit more competitive than that. And then Williams just behind in 9th. And then Alpine at the very back. Very embarrassing from Alpine to be, 10th and last in this final sector. Again, given that it is such a good indicator, this final sector, as to the amount of grip that a team has with their car. Again, they have probably cut a bit of wing off the car to be stronger in a straight line, but still very poor final sector from Alpine. So, coming out of practice 2, if we go back to the top 10 from practice 2 quickly before I get onto my predictions, I would say coming out of practice 2, I think Ferrari have, going into qualifying, and from what I saw in practice 3 as well, I'd say Ferrari probably have just about the best car for qualifying. And when I'm talking just about, I'm talking a 10th of a second at most. It will be very close between Ferrari and Red Bull. I have no doubt about that. But I think Ferrari have just about got the edge over Red Bull. And I think Red Bull, and even Helmut Marko referenced this yesterday, saying Ferrari were surprisingly quick on the long runs, and they were surprisingly quick, and their time management was surprisingly good. I think Red Bull are surprised as to how competitive Ferrari have turned up for this Grand Prix. And let's hope that they will continue it for the entire weekend. So, I think Ferrari have just about got the edge over Red Bull. And then third best, I would probably go Aston Martin. Their cars looked pretty competitive so far and pretty consistent through the practice sessions. And then fourth best, I would probably go with Mercedes, simply because they've got better straight line speed than the McLaren, which is really keeping them ahead of McLaren at the moment. And then McLaren very close behind in fifth. And then after that, I'd probably go Racing Bulls 6th, Williams then 7th, Sauber 8th, Haas 9th, and Alpine 10th. I think that is what my pecking order would be going into qualifying. Whether that'll be correct or not, we'll have to see in just over an hour's time. But that's what I think the pecking order is from practice so far. And with that, let's get into my final predictions for qualifying. Of course, this is my top 10. Not going to do the entire field. And I do believe that Charles Leclerc and Ferrari, for the first time in 2024, will take pole position by about a 10th of a second from Max Verstappen. Those gaps you can see is the predicted gaps I think it will be through the top 10. Carlos Sainz, I think, will be in third, behind Verstappen, with Sergio Perez in fourth. Alonso 5th, Russell 6th, Lance Stroll, I'm going in 7th. I know there might be a surprise, but he has been pretty strong this weekend. And then I'm going Piastri in 8th, Lewis Hamilton 9th, Hamilton still having a bit of a struggle this weekend. And Lando Norris, I think, will be very close behind in P10. Really, from 5th to 10th, it's going to be pretty close, I think, through, the entirety of qualifying. But that's my top 10 and my prediction, especially for pole position. Let me know yours in the live chat and in the poll running currently in the chat, and I'll get to those results again later on before we get into Q3. But before I get on to some upgrades that some of the teams have brought, just a quick update for some of you guys that might be new to the channel. Make sure to subscribe for more content like this, because we do qualifying and race watch-alongs for every Grand Prix, and the case will be, and it'll be the same case tomorrow as well. Because tomorrow I will be live at 2 a.m. UK time, 2 hours before the race starts in Melbourne for the Australian Grand Prix race watch-along. 2 hours build-up, then a watch-along of the 58-lap race, and then hopefully a bit of a reaction afterwards, only if, though, we actually get a proper race and not just a procession for 58 laps. So yeah, make sure to come along to that tomorrow at a very early start. Yeah, quickly before we go back to the main page and get the timer back up on the screen and I come to your comments in the chat, let's get into some upgrades. So these are performance upgrades only, by the way. These are not including the circuit-specific ones because they don't really count. So Ferrari, I've got a new rear wing pylon side winglet. Very small upgrade, nothing really that's going to affect the performance of the car that much. Aston Martin have a new revised front wing flap. Again, very small upgrade, and a lot of these upgrades are pretty small. We're not going to get big upgrades yet, probably not for another 3 to 4 races, I think. Probably the month of May is when we'll see big upgrades coming. Williams have got a new rear corner. Don't know if that is on Alex Albon's current car, which obviously was Logan Sargent's car, but that's what they brought initially for the weekend. Racing Bulls, a redesigned rear wing profile. Again, small upgrade. And then for Sauber, a couple upgrades for them. Redesigned front wing elements. I think the redesigned elements is the top 2 parts of the front wing right next to the nose cone. And again, a small adjustment to that part of the front wing, and also an adjusted front wing end plate. But again, small upgrades at this point of 2024. But let me just get the timer back on screen. There you go. And we've got pretty much an hour to go until qualifying begins in Melbourne. So for the next probably half an hour or so, we're going to get into your comments in the chat. So keep them coming and let me know what you think is going to happen in qualifying. And if you want to talk about anything F1 related in terms of certain bits of news at the moment, then make sure to post it in the chat and I'll try and answer some of your comments. So, by the way, thank you, Darth Lord Raven, for the €2, I think, super chat. Saying Leclerc could take pole, but can they win? Well, again, looking at the long runs, I mean, if they get a really good grid position, maybe they could. I mean, even though there is 4 DRS zones at this track, it's still not that easy to overtake in Melbourne because the cars are very big and wide. And obviously, a lot of parts of the track are quite narrow. So, you know, if Ferrari lock out the front row, then yeah, I think they could. I think they could win. I don't think their pace would be enough of a drop off necessarily to mean that Red Bull are just gonna, you know, easily win the race still. And I think it could be Ferrari this weekend. Terms of their performance, not quite as good as what we saw in Las Vegas, but similar, where in Vegas they had clearly the best car in qualifying. Obviously it's going to be a bit closer here than it was in Vegas, but then in the race they were, I wouldn't say necessarily quicker than Red Bull, but they were right on the same pace, and at certain points of the race were quicker, certain points of the race were slower. It could be like a situation like that. Yeah, thanks for super chat. Good to see you as well. So let's get into a few of your comments. And as well, if you haven't already, smash the like button. We're on 20 likes. We've got about 100 watching, so let's try and get up to like 40 plus likes if we can. in the next half an hour or so. Busy Child says, I agree, Chaz are worth staying up for this one, I think. Yeah, it should be definitely something worth staying up for. My biggest fear, though, is tomorrow, if we don't get a good race, if we get like a real boring procession type race like what we had in Bahrain, I think people could really, within the F1 community, I think people really could start to turn, because for the majority of people obviously watching the race in Melbourne, it's going to be at a bad time, either late at night or very, very early in the morning. So I think F1, especially this weekend, needs a good race, or at least a much more competitive race than what we saw in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, again, because of the timing of the event. Because, yeah, I don't think it'll go down well with a lot of the biggest markets for F1 viewership, which is going to be Europe and America, North America. As the F2 sprint race, by the way, they're just coming to the end. And Isaac Hadjar has absolutely dominated. He's about to win by about 6 seconds from Roman Stanek, who started the sprint on pole. Dennis Hauger is going to finish in third. Hauger, who actually is all over the back of Stanek now for second and might actually overtake him into the final corner, possibly. Will he send it? No, not quite. And no, I don't think he's going to get the position. As Hadjar now comes to the line to win. Yeah, Dennis Hauger, yesterday in qualifying, ended up on pole ahead of Antonelli by like 0.4 of a second. So I don't know what he's been smoking. But a shame for Antonelli that he was took out, because he was making some good progress. Bartled Rome says, hey guys, I'm here, can't sleep, lol, 4:43 a.m. What do I see? Shazza HD. Did you get some sleep, Shazza? Well, my sleeping pattern is well adjusted, let's say, to this event, because my normal sleeping pattern, if there's nothing I've got to be up like in the day for, like uni or whatever, let's say I'm covering F1 or whatever like that, my normal sleeping pattern is going to sleep early in the morning, like between 6 and 8 a.m. and then waking up 5, 6 p.m. That's what my normal sleeping pattern has been for probably the last, 10 to 15 years. I know it's not healthy, but that's just the way it is. A lot of people that spend a lot of their time online, which I do, that's just normal for us. So, yeah, it's actually good in a way, this event, for, I guess, what my normal sleeping pattern is, because, again, it's, I'm normally up at this time anyway, but when you have to combine that with, uni and maybe even work in certain situations, it can be tough. No doubt about it. And of course, this is not the end of the early morning races, because in a couple of weeks, we'll be racing at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning in Europe or Japan. And then a couple of weeks after that is the return to Shanghai, China. So, yeah, the next race for us Europeans that will be in PM is Miami, which is the first weekend of May, which is like 6 weeks away, something like that. Chad saying, love this channel, great job, Chad. Don't know if you made that mistake on purpose or not. Yanni says, anyone noticed that all talk about Mercedes' clever front wing and trick adjustable front suspension hasn't been mentioned for a while? Well, yeah, it doesn't get mentioned when you're performing like absolute shit, which Mercedes are. And I don't, I know there might be certain Mercedes fans out there that are coping about, the Mercedes level of performance and that. But let's be honest, the way Mercedes are performing at the moment is nowhere near good enough. And at this point, I think you could say they're not even better than they were last year, and you could even say that they are worse than they were last year. Whether you're comparing them to the start of last year or the end of last year, you know what I mean? So yeah, obviously, no one's gonna be mentioning those little things for the design they've gone for too much when clearly they're not working. Yesterday, the rear end of the Mercedes car was all over the place. I know it was a bit windy, but still, it was quite dramatic how bad they were through some of the medium and high-speed corners. And there was some interesting comments from George Russell, I think post FP2, and he was, and I've noticed this the more I've been, let's say an F1 content creator, and I've, listened to driver interviews and stuff like that. When a driver for a team mentions a lot about learning about the car, that is code for our car is shit and we're learning how to improve it. And yesterday, Russell, in his interview, constantly mentioning learning about the car, learning about the car, learning about the car. And it's because they know that that car is awful. It is a awful car for a team of their stature. It is really bad. They're closer to being a midfield team than they are a front running team. And if they can't fundamentally, improve what they've got there, then they're going to struggle to even get a podium this season. Because McLaren, they're going to get better. I saw Mika Hakkinen, who's I think a McLaren ambassador, yesterday, mentioning that McLaren have got some big upgrades coming in May. Aston Martin, haven't been that great to start the season in terms of their race performances, but they could probably get better, and they've got a better car, at least in qualifying trim, than Mercedes have got. So if they don't really improve on what they've got, Mercedes, they are going to be left behind pretty quickly. And then if that happens, then they may as well give up on next year's car and just concentrate on 2026. Yanni says, hey, does anyone remember the last race that Max was passed on track by another driver? I think, wouldn't it be Las Vegas? I think was the last one. When Leclerc repassed him for the lead. Pretty sure that was the last one. If it wasn't that, then before then, I have no idea. You have to go back to 2022, and even then, I think you'd struggle to find too many examples. Who's here because they can't afford Sky Sports? Talking to Sky Sports, I'm going to guess this is because of cost cutting, but the Sky Sports F1 crew this weekend, not all of them, but half of them are not even in Australia. The presenting crew, which is Natalie Pinkham, and then you've got certain pundits like Karun, Chandhok, you've got Naomi Schiff as well. They're back in London in the Sky Sports F1 studio that they've just created. But they do have certain members of the team in Australia. They've got Crofty, Brundle, Ted Kravitz. But I think that's it. And I'm interested about that. Very interested because this has to be the first race weekend that Sky F1 have not fully shown up for since they, took the contract in 2012, which was what, 12 years ago. So I'm very interested by that because maybe, not saying this is going to happen because obviously their current contract is until 2029, but maybe this might be the beginning of them slowly pulling themselves away from Formula One in terms of, being able to afford the coverage, because obviously with each new time they sign a deal, the price is going up, and maybe when it comes up for renewal in a few years' time, maybe they won't be able to afford it anymore. Very possible. And if they can't, and they if they don't renew that deal, it'd be very interesting to see where F1 coverage in the UK ends up. You off uni for next 2 weeks, Chazza? Asks Brooke. No. Next week is my last week at uni until the Easter break starts. Obviously, next weekend is Easter weekend. So yeah, I'm in middle of next week, and then I've got 3 weeks until the next load of lectures. But yeah, I'm well, after the first half of the year, doing well, just hoping to get the projects I'm doing for the second half of the year, get them, going and finished, and hopefully get some further good marks. Russell just loves to complain. Robert Perkle says, "Hello everyone. I'm wondering, is this what they call an anxiety attack when my favorite Max is not top dog?" I mean, even if Max doesn't get pole, and if he, let's say, he's on the front row in second, I mean, we've seen many times in the last couple of years Max not be on pole and still win. So, not necessarily much to worry about if that does happen. Paulie says Hill is doing the race/practice broadcast with Australian broadcasters. With Damon though, he's done a couple races with Sky in the last year, but he's not been on a lot. Like they are not using him as much as they were before, which I'm not complaining. I don't really rate Damon Hill as a pundit. I just don't think he offers that great of insight. Definitely not as good as others. And I think some of his takes as a pundit are not very good. Dorthard Raymond says, in the last laps of practice 3, I saw the Mercedes was more stable on the rear. Yeah, Mercedes looked better, but will they be able to keep that up in qualifying? We'll have to see. I've not got very high hopes, if I'm being honest. Darth Raymond saying, just read an article that Max is not 100% comfortable with the car here. Yeah, I think there might have been some slight setup issues from yesterday, which looks like they've improved upon, but whether it's good enough for them to actually get pole, we'll have to see. In another 45 minutes to go already until qualifying. But yeah, they definitely seem stronger in third practice. Robert Perkle says, I do find some solace that Louis Hambone is 10th. Comments here. Dad saying kind of, but love my name. Red Robin says, I want Williams to get points, but Alex hit the barriers on turn 10 would be funny. I would echo those sentiments. I don't think, drivers crashing is funny, but it would be very interesting if Albon was in a good position for a point finish on Sunday and he ended up crashing again. That would be interesting. But as I said, and I saw, what was it, Tomo, obviously the F1 YouTuber, he did a video on it. A couple of other people did a video on it. Loads of reaction on Twitter to it about how so unfair on Logan. I just don't see how it is. I mean, yeah, he didn't crash, but the team's job is to get the best result possible, and they're not going to get that with Logan Sargent, who is not on the same level as Alex Albon. He just isn't. And yeah, it is a vote of no confidence in him, but I think it could very well be that the reason Logan Sargent is in the Williams car is because Williams could not find a clear improvement on him in terms of a replacement. You may say Mick Schumacher. I'm not the biggest Mick Schumacher fan, put it that way. I'm not necessarily sure he is as big of an improvement as people would think. I mean, I think Mick is better than Logan, but I don't think it's like a clear step up. I still think Mick would be behind Albon. So, yeah. I think that's probably what's happened there with Williams. But like I said, it's not unfair. If Logan wants that situation not to happen, then all he's got to do is perform at the same level as Alex Albon. Because I guarantee you, let's say with Alpine, this happened where Esteban Ocon had a massive crash and they couldn't fix his chassis and they had no spare chassis left. They would not have told Pierre Gasly to get out of his car and let Esteban race in his car for the weekend. Do you know why? Because Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon regularly are at the same level with each other. They're both at the same level. There's not one driver clearly by a few tenths of a second ahead of the other, like there is at Williams. So I just completely reject this narrative that it is unfair. Not unfair at all. If Logan, like I've said before, just be better and this won't happen. Simple as. I mean, I think, as I said earlier, if I was Williams' team boss, he would never even be in the car. Never mind this decision having to be made, because I would try to have, if I was Williams' team principal, I'd try to have the two most competitive drivers I could possibly get in that car. And even if, Mick Schumacher is not the biggest step up on Logan Sargent, I'd probably still rather him than Logan Sargent in that car. Because at least, Mick's a Formula 2 champion. What's some other comments here? Paulie says he has been okay the way the broadcast is going. Not as a standard, but okay as a lot of viewers are probably one race a year viewers. Bro. Butterfly Blue Short says Sky could do with cutting the fluff. One question, a one race pundit and Brundle. Nice to be back in the chat. Hope you're well, Chaz. Cheers for that. Hope you're well too. I think there is I think you are right with what you say there. I think there was an issue at one point of Sky where for a race weekend they would have way too many talking heads. A few years ago you would have, Anthony Davidson, Damon Hill, Johnny Herbert, Martin Brundle. Who else would you have? Paul di Resta, and it felt like there was too many pundits on the coverage when, this weekend they've got is, Brundle, who's in Australia, just doing the commentary, and then they've got Naomi Schiff and Corinne Chandhok in the studio. That is, I think, better than than having tons of pundits. And I mean, you go look back at the old UK coverage, like when it was on the BBC, when it was on ITV, there was no issues with it when it had, only like 2 or 3 pundits. Like with BBC F1, you had Jake Humphrey presenter, and then you had, was it Eddie Jordan, David Coulthard, Martin Brundle. That was it, basically. And then ITV was what? Mark Blundell and I can't remember the other guy's name. Is it Tony Jardine? Was his name? Again, that's all it needs. You don't need, I've seen it though in other sport sport coverages, let's say, like in football, and just other sports in general, how there's just more and more pundits being on a single coverage of a sporting event, and it's just way too much. Way too much. Um, see if I can find other comments here. Red Robin says James made the best logical decision. Sucks a little for Logan, but James has given him borrowed time that he doesn't deserve. Exactly. Couldn't have put it better. And I'm just, you know what I'm sick of with, and it's not everyone in the F1 community, but there is a lot of people in the F1 community that are very like they infantilize the drivers so much, like treating Logan Sargent like a baby because he's been, he's been, I don't know how you want to phrase it, removed, kicked out of the car so Alex can be in the car. Again, the like babying of Logan Sargent and the infantilization, I guess you could call it, and just a lot of the drivers is so annoying to me. It's like this isn't like a kid not being picked at school for a sports team. It's not like that level of bad. Like, come on. It's, as you say, it's a logical decision. Williams' job is to score points. Alex Albon is by far their biggest chance of that. Has Logan Sargent even scored a point in Formula One? I think he might have done last year at one race, but the chances of him scoring a point is like 0 point whatever percent. When Alex, we've seen, last year he scored points plenty of times. And in plenty of races where he probably, I won't say didn't deserve to, but he probably wasn't expected to. Anyway, let's find some other comments here. As how long have we got? 37 minutes. Yeah, I'll read out a few more comments and then we'll get on to the teams and I'll go through how I think they'll get on in this session. Todd says Logan hasn't done squat. Albon, I think you mean, not Alvin. Gives them the best chance of points, but if Albon crashes, then you have to question the decision. I mean, yeah, you can question the decision if Albon crashes, but I think that's more just the power of hindsight. I think even if Alex crashes again, if he still is able to, before he has that crash, if he's still able to put the car in a position to score points, I think that proves the point that we have that Albon is a much better bet for scoring points than Logan is, and the right decision has been made. So, and I even heard it from Ted Kravitz, who's currently speaking on the Sky F1 broadcast right now. I even heard it from him during yesterday's practice broadcast that he doesn't agree with it at all, and that's just not the way Williams go racing. I mean, maybe under Claire Williams, that's not the way they would have went racing, but I can guarantee you, 30 years ago when they had Frank Williams and Patrick Head, if they had only one car and they had one driver that was miles quicker than the other, they would have had that driver, whoever that driver was, who was miles quicker, in the car over the other one, if that car that was remaining was, his car. So, yeah. Good decision from the Williams team boss. A tough decision, yes. It is tough for Logan, but again, I've already mentioned why it is, I think, clearly the right decision. But good to see that James Vowles is willing to make the tough decisions, because a weak leader would have just let Logan race on, as far as I'm concerned. And James has clearly shown that he has the right, I think, approach and attitude that, we go racing to score points and to get the best result possible, not to, make people feel better about themselves. Okay, I can find a few more comments in regards to this. Rooks puts this in 2023. Logan destroyed $4.3 million of car crashes, the highest damage cost of any driver that season. Yeah, that's another stat I think I saw in the last few hours. Again, Logan Sargent in the last year has the highest accident cost rate, I guess you would call it, of any driver. So, who's to say that Logan wouldn't have smashed it in the wall himself? I mean, he did have Logan a spin in practice yesterday as well, so he could have easily crashed, yesterday or even today. Pod saying, what I want to know is why drivers like Hulkenberg, Magnussen, Guan Yu, Bottas, Ricciardo still have seats with all the young talent out there waiting to get the call up. Well, with some of them, it's because they are still performing at a good enough level and vitally have experience, lots of experience, which, let's be honest, if you're still quick enough and you've got lots of experience, that is crucial for a Formula One team. Very, very important. And that's why, Hulkenberg, still should be on the grid. Bottas, even though I know there's not a lot of Bottas fans out there, I still think he's good enough to be on the grid. Plus, he's got a lot of good experience for the Sauber team. The drivers definitely like Zhou. I'm, just not a fan of. I don't see what he offers really in terms of the sporting side. Ricciardo, I mean, let's wait a few more races, but I think I can see why certain people are making the arguments they're making in regards to Daniel Ricciardo and whether he's, or should be on the grid right now. I mean, Kevin Magnussen, I think this is very likely going to be his final year in the Haas car because he's not performing anywhere near good enough. Is Kevin still in that car? So we'll see, if he can improve on that. Hopefully he can, because I like the guy, but he's not as good as he used to be. That is very clear to see. One thing I will say, I want to mention this quickly. I did see, and I mentioned him earlier, Tomo, the F1 content creator. I'm sure you guys know who he is. He did a video a couple days ago about how Zhou Guan Yu is the perfect driver for Sauber. And his argument essentially was because Audi, in terms of the car company, rather than say the racing, the motorsport side, because China, I think, is their biggest market. That is, really the biggest reason, let's say, that Zhou should be in the car, and also because, according to Tom, he thinks that Zhou is a good, solid number 2 option, which I don't see how he thinks that. I don't think he's proven even that in Formula One. And as well with with Audi, when they, I mean, now they're basically took over full shares of the team, but they're not properly coming in until 2026. At the end of the day, that Sauber team is a midfield team. So you can't be doing number 1 and number 2 driver stuff for a midfield team. You can't be doing it because you can't afford to only have one driver who can get the best results. You need 2 very competitive drivers who are on the same performance level, like what Alpine have got with Gasly and Ocon. That's what you need for a midfield team. Now, of course, Audi, they want to be a top team, which is great, but they don't have any access to the top drivers. Therefore, they're not going to become probably a top team, and they're not going to build a front-running car for years because they're not just going to come in and be a top team. That's not going to happen at all. So yeah, I just completely disagree with that, and I really hope that with Audi, I really hope that they do not keep Zhou in the team. Not because I don't like Zhou as a person. I don't really, never met the guy. He seems absolutely fine as a person. But I don't want them to keep him in the car for a reason that is not good from the sporting side, from the racing side. Because, the best way to indicate with a racing team how serious they take their operation is how good their driver lineup is compared to what, they realistically, the type of drivers they could have in their car. And with Audi, I'm hoping they will try to get the best driver lineup they can possibly have, which would probably be, at the moment, Carlos Sainz and Nico Hulkenberg would probably be the best lineup they could have in that car. You could say Fernando Alonso, but I don't think Fernando Alonso is going to leave Aston Martin for Audi. I just don't see that happening, at least not yet. I guarantee Alonso wants to see, where that team is performance-wise before he maybe even considers going to them. So yeah, I think a Sainz Hulkenberg lineup would be perfect. Two very experienced drivers and two drivers that are performing at a very good level. That would be a lot better than Sainz and Zhou, or what they've got right now, which is Bottas and Zhou. Another super chat from Butterfly Blue Shorts for €3. Saying only world champs on the grid and the rest get relegated. Nah. That wouldn't be. I don't think that'd be that great. Chris F says you were talking about people in shit cars, put a young driver in that car and no chance they improve. What are you talking about exactly? Do you mean that, Zhou is never going to be good because he's in a bad car? Because, I can see your point, but at the end of the day, he can't even match Valtteri Bottas. A Valtteri Bottas, may I remind you, who is not performing at his peak. This is post-prime Valtteri Bottas. This is Valtteri Bottas on the downslope of his career, and Zhou, since he's coming to Formula 1, he can't match him. Bottas comfortably outperformed him last year and in 2022. So far this season, yeah, Zhou started well compared to Bottas, but let's wait in a few races and let's see if that continues. If it does, great. If it doesn't, which I think it probably won't continue, then, yeah. At the end of the day, with drivers, in terms of, their performance level and how good they are, the number one thing you have to do, firstly, is beat your teammate. No matter how good or terrible your car is, that is the number one aim. Beat your teammate. If Zhou was beating Bottas regularly, then yeah, I would say, you know what? He's not the greatest driver in the world, but he's not in a good car. He deserves, a chance maybe at a bit of a better team. Again, if he can't, if he's been comfortably beaten by a past his prime Valtteri Bottas, I don't think that's a good indication at all for a possible successful Formula 1 career. I just don't think it is at all. Todd saying, do you think Andretti buys Alpine? And if yes, who would he get to drive? I do think there is a good chance he would go for someone from IndyCar, like what's his name? Is it Alex Palou? I think that's how you pronounce it. Sorry if I've mispronounced his last name. I think someone like him, maybe they'd go for that, and then probably partner them up with an experienced F1 driver. Gasly or Ocon. We'd have to see, but yeah, I do get a good feeling that they would go for an IndyCar driver at least with one of the seats they have. Red Robinson is going to take Audi at least 5 years to be competitive, in my opinion. Yeah, in terms of being like a front-running team competitive, it's going to take, minimum 5 years. So, yeah, hopefully in 10 years' time, Audi will be fighting for race wins and championships. Chris F says, just talking about RB, Haas, Williams, their cars aren't matching the field. They will always be out of the points. Yeah, again, that's true. But like I said, as long as you beat your teammate and, if you can beat them comfortably rather than like barely beating them, then that is enough, I think, to to keep you on the grid in Formula One. But if you're being beaten by your teammate, no matter how good your teammate is, then you're always going to be under pressure for your seat. That's always going to happen. Let me just quickly post the link of the stream out one more time. Come join us here along qualifying in Melbourne. And I'll just read a couple more comments and then I'll get onto these teams and a few stats that I want to get into as well. Rooksford says Alpine is hard to take over, production based in France, I believe. Well, no, I think it's. I don't think all of it's in England, but I think most of the car engine stuff is, I think, in the UK. I might be wrong with that though. I think isn't it still that the power unit, I think they still make in France, and the actual like the chassis and the all of that stuff is in the UK. That they still have that arrangement. But Chris says the most impressive driver is Albon. The face that he can do what he does in a Williams is just mind blowing. Love watching him race. And right, I thought it ended the comments as something else then. And I hope he gets a shot in a real car. Sorry, I just misread what you said there. I thought it said something else. Yeah, Albon definitely, I think, in line for a promotion back to a bit of a better team. Yeah, let me just hide that timer for a few minutes, as we've got just over 20 minutes to go until qualifying. And let me just whiz through the teams to give my overall thoughts as to how I think they'll all get on. So for Red Bull, yeah, they're going to be obviously right there in the fight pole position. I think, though, as I said earlier, I think Ferrari just about in qualifying trim have got the edge. But it will be still like, a few hundredths of a second or maybe at most a tenth of a second between, say, Verstappen and Leclerc, Verstappen and Sainz, whoever the Ferrari driver is, who is quickest, who, most likely is going to be Charles Leclerc. So yeah, I think really with Red Bull, all they got to do is hope that the two drivers can get the absolute most out of the car. If they do that and they're not on pole, then fair enough. Ferrari were better, Ferrari were quicker. But if they can, especially with Max Verstappen, if they can get the absolute best lap out of that car, then that probably could be enough to end up on pole position. So, yeah, we'll see. It's going to be a very good close fight between Leclerc and Verstappen. That is really the main fight to watch out for in qualifying. For Ferrari, as I said, I think they've got the slight edge on Red Bull. They've looked super quick ever since FP1. Leclerc has looked very, very good in that car. He looked very at home, let's say, in the Ferrari. Stark contrast to a year ago. I remember this track last year where he had lots of struggles with the balance, just wasn't happy with the car at all. The Leclerc we're seeing right now is the Leclerc we saw at the start of 2022, the one that was leading the Drivers' Championship for the first few races. And with Leclerc in the form he's in, he's a pretty good bet, I think, for pole position. He's took pole quite a few times in the last few races. Obviously, at the end of last season, he took pole in, Las Vegas, Mexico, US Grand Prix. He was, very, very strong in qualifying towards the end of last year and has qualified on the front row in a lot of races in the last, 6, 7 rounds that we've had in Formula One. So Leclerc, again, very good bet for pole position. With Carlos Sainz, be interesting to see how close he can get, because in practice 2, he was quite far away, but then in practice 3, he looked very strong. So he might be a very interesting part of this pole position story and might be able to spring a surprise and be the one who takes pole. If Ferrari, of course, can lock out the front row, that would be great. But I think the aim for them has got to be at least pole position for the Australian Grand Prix. For Mercedes, their car balance-wise is better than it was on in Friday practice, but it's still not looking that good. I'm still not really that confident that they do have a quicker car than Aston Martin. Probably do have, in terms of lap time, a better car than McLaren, but in terms of grip, which is very important for this track, along with, a good top speed, they're still not looking very good, Mercedes. So, as I said earlier, with Mercedes, if you're a Mercedes fan, brace yourself, because this could be a very tough day at the office, and I definitely do not think it will be as good as a year ago, where, remember, this time last year, Mercedes qualified 2nd and 3rd for the Australian Grand Prix, where this weekend they'll do well to get a car in the top 5. For McLaren, we'll see how they can combat the top speed issues and whether they do take a bit of wing off like they probably did in practice yesterday to combat that, and see whether that does also truly affect their pace in the first and final sector. Setup, very important for McLaren, clearly, with the certain, let's say, deficiencies they have with their car. Looking very closely in the two drivers. Oscar Piastri, though, looks as though he's probably got the edge on Lando Norris, and good to see for the home fans in Australia. Piastri performing pretty well, but because McLaren, again, with the setup issues in terms of, if they don't cut enough wing off, they're going to be too slow down the straights, but then if they, do cut some wing off, then they're going to be lacking the pace they probably will have in the first and final sector. That is going to compromise their qualifying session. I think they'll be a lot stronger tomorrow. But yeah, I'm not expecting a very quick, let's say, qualifying session from McLaren. And I think back end of the top 10 is the best bet with the McLaren team. For Aston Martin, they've looked good so far. Fernando Alonso, you would expect to be very strong. He's always been very competitive here in Melbourne. Of course, last year ended up on the podium. Even a couple of years ago, the Alpine was very close to being possibly on the front row of the Australian Grand Prix. Always been super quick at the Albert Park circuit. Whether he'll be able to keep that up in a way that will get Aston Martin into a really good grid position, we'll have to see. I think P5, P6 is where really Aston Martin should be aiming. If they can lock out the third row of the grid, that would be great. But I think, 5th place has got to be the aim for the team. It is pretty unlikely they'll lock out the third row of the grid because of just how close it is in there with Mercedes and McLaren as well. But in quali trim, Aston Martin's car, it looks good. It's not as good as the front two teams, definitely not as good, but it looks good enough to be, let's say, best of the rest. And let's go on to the more midfield teams. Racing Bulls look like they've got the best midfield car. Tsunoda was in the top 10 yesterday, and the Racing Bulls car has looked pretty handy around the track so far this weekend. We'll see whether they keep that up. Fingers crossed, Daniel Ricciardo, his home track, can actually have a good qualifying session because he needs it, because his season so far has not been good enough. And with Tsunoda quicker than him yesterday in practice 2, he cannot afford for that to happen yet again. He needs to reverse his fortunes around. Alpine, I think, will probably have the slowest car. There's still there's a lot of work to do on that Alpine car to get it anywhere near competitive to be a contender for a points finish. For Williams, obviously one car in the running for them with Alex Albon. Hopefully doesn't crash. The thing is as well with Williams, if you look where Logan Sargent was yesterday in 13th, and he wasn't a million miles away from the top 10, with Albon and how quick Albon normally is compared to Logan Sargent, if Albon can keep that pace up, Alex Albon might be a dark horse for a Q3 appearance. Of course, last year qualified in 7th place, was very strong until he had that crash in the race. But do watch out for Albon because I think he could be a dark horse for this session. Sauber look pretty mediocre as they usually are. And Haas F1, for some reason, not really sure why, just don't have a lot of pace this weekend. I do think they'll be quicker than Alpine. Probably get a car into Q2, but they're not top 10 material at all. And here's a quick reminder of what my predictions are, which I showed earlier. This is my top 10. Leclerc, I think, will take pole from Verstappen 2nd, Sainz 3rd, Perez 4th, Alonso 5th, Russell 6th, Stroll 7th, Piastri 8th, Hamilton 9th, and Lando Norris in P10. So those are my predictions, guys. Let me know, again, in the chat, if you haven't already, what your predictions are before we get the session underway in just under 15 minutes' time. And in a few minutes, I will go through some couple stats before we get into qualifying, just to inform you guys as to some key stats in regards to the fight for pole position. Let's have a look at some comments quick. Yanni says, if Aston Martin can get Max Newey and they'll have a Honda engine, they can be a rebadged Red Bull. I don't think they're going to get Max and Newey. I think, yeah, that would be quite the surprise if they were able to do that. And by the way, I saw Silverback asking, where is Astristivo? He did post a comment yesterday about how this is the first race of the year we're able to watch on TV. Probably he is, watching it on TV instead of being here. Or maybe he's gonna tune into us soon. Who knows? But yeah, I think that's probably what he's doing, because I think whatever subscriptions or whatever he has, I think he's only able to watch this race live, in terms of this is the only race live that he can actually tune in for, as opposed to all the other races. So maybe he won't be in the chat this weekend, but I'm sure he will be in a couple of weeks in Japan. Ruxford, does Oz have F1 on free to air TV for this one weekend like we do for Silverstone? Yeah, probably. Probably. It could be something like that. But yeah, just over 10 more minutes and then we'll be into this session. The sun has come out a lot more at Albert Park. It was quite, fully come out now. It's pretty much a clear, sunny day now. As earlier, it was a bit more of an autumn-like day, bit of a overcasty type day. But yeah, really hot now. Law VS did a video about Max and Newey at Aston. It would get rid of Horner and the Red Bull GmbH, and they would continue with Honda. Yeah, I think it's, I don't know, too good to be true. I don't know exactly how to phrase why I don't think it's going to happen, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's realistic. I think it's more possible that Max and Newey, if they both leave Red Bull, that they will split. I don't think they're both going to go to the same team. I think that would be, I think that'd be surprising if a team was able to acquire both Max Verstappen and Adrian Newey. Like buying two nuclear warheads. Silverback says, Chaz, you're drunk, and then gives his prediction, which is Carlos P1, Max P2, Perez P3, Charles P4, the old man P5, Oscar P6, Russell P7, Lance P8, Russell again in P9, and Albon in P10. I think you might be drunk with Russell qualifying 7th and 9th, but yeah, I'm sure you probably think Hamilton's going to be in 7th, something like that. And there he is. Astro saying, yo, timing, yes, watching on telly anytime I get to do so all year. Yeah. Good to see you. And hopefully you enjoy the session. Should be a good one. As well, can I say, it is so good. I don't know why they didn't do this earlier, but it's so good that they've got F2 and F3 at the Australian Grand Prix now, because the fans at the event get so much action. You get F1, F2, F3, Aussie V8, supercars, Porsche 911 cars. There's tons of action. Tons of action out there. It's, yeah, brilliant running of the event. This is further work going on to a Mercedes. Don't know what Mercedes this is. I think it's Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes. But yeah, another couple comments I'll read out and then we'll get into qualifying. Just going to open up Twitter to see if there's any quick news I can bring you guys. Yeah, a lot of work going on towards the front of the Mercedes car of Hamilton's. I don't know if it's like an issue with the car or that they're just doing a last minute thing for the setup on like the suspension areas. Silverback says, yeah, you've known me for 8 years. Approx, don't expect perfection. Act like you've been on this roller coaster. Crystal Racing saying Max is stuck with Yoss unless his dad goes to jail or something worse happens. Even in prison, Yoss will still find a wiretap. I mean, him having a good relationship with his father is, it's a good thing. But I really hope that if Max does leave Red Bull and he, goes to whoever team, I hope it's his decision and not his dad's decision. Because I don't want, and this is not just a Verstappen thing. This is for any sports person ever. Your parents should not be affecting your career in that way. The decision as to where you are going to perform your sport in terms of team, whatever, should be up to the individual, not parents and people to the side. Let's say. And yeah, Todd's saying Max needs to be his own man and tell his father to stay out of his business. Crystal Racing says, and Max would have another lapdog in Super Lance. The ultimate lapdog. It'd be funny if him and Lance were teammates because it would be the biggest like hammering of a teammate. What Max would do to Stroll. It'd be the biggest hammering of a teammate that we've seen in like 20 or 30 years. It would be quite funny actually, because it would regularly you'd have like Max in the top 10 and then Stroll would be like a second off every qualifying session. Robert Parker says the only place Max will go is Ferrari. Goodbye, Sainz. Well, with Hamilton going there, that's not going to happen. The only place I can see him going if he was to legit leave Red Bull is Mercedes, because they're probably the most sure bet outside of Red Bull and Ferrari at the moment to have, success in the future. Let me find one final comment and then get into this qualifying session. As the F1 intro is now playing on the broadcast, so that means we're not very far away. Tifa says Lance Stroll got beaten by past his prime Vettel. That's I won't say a massive reason why I think Lance Stroll should not be on the grid, but definitely adds to it. But thank you guys for commenting. Make sure to keep them coming, of course, during qualifying, as we are about to begin qualifying in Melbourne. And before we get into the session, a couple things to go through before we begin. Firstly, championship standings. Max Verstappen, of course, at the top, 15 points clear of Sergio Perez. Charles Leclerc in third. If he has a really strong weekend this weekend, say a race win, could really start to get himself going in the championship. Then you got Russell in fourth, Piastri fifth, Sainz in sixth, Alonso seventh, Norris eighth, Hamilton ninth, and Oliver Behrman in 10th from his first race in Saudi Arabia. On the constructor side, Red Bull nearly 40 points clear already of Ferrari. McLaren in third, 2 points clear of Mercedes. Aston Martin in fifth, Haas in sixth, and then Williams seventh, Sauber eighth, Racing Bulls ninth, and Alpine in P10. But yeah, a couple stats to get into before we get into this qualifying session in regards to the fight for pole. Starting with Red Bull. Couple stats with them. Max Verstappen, of course, took pole in last year's qualifying in Melbourne. Red Bull, though, don't have necessarily the best record in qualifying here in Australia. They've only taken pole 4 times in Australia since 2010. I know that might sound a lot, but, 2010 was quite a long time ago, 14 years ago. So, yeah, it's not been necessarily the best Grand Prix event for them. And Max looking to take his second consecutive pole in Australia. Meanwhile, for Ferrari, Charles Leclerc's last pole in Australia was in 2022, where he dominated the weekend. Ferrari, though, their record in Melbourne is even worse and definitely not good. That pole in 2022 is their only pole position in Australia since 2010. And actually, the last pole position Ferrari had in Australia before 2022 was in 2007 with Kimi Räikkönen. That was Kimi Räikkönen's debut weekend for the Scuderia. That's how long ago they had a pole before 2022. So not necessarily the greatest record in qualifying here in Melbourne. Leclerc, though, has qualified inside the top 2 positions on the grid for the last 4 F1 races in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Abu Dhabi, and Las Vegas. And then obviously it had a couple pole positions before then in Mexico and Texas as well. But let me just get the timer ready. Of course, Q1 will be an 18-minute long session. As you can see, there is the cutoff zone on the left-hand side with the dotted line and the red markings, which indicate where the cutoff zone is. And I will sync up the timer at the 17-minute mark, as I usually do. And let me just quickly update, obviously, Sargent to the very back. I tried to remove Logan Sargent in my overlay list that I have, the JavaScript thing that displays the running order, and I couldn't do it without it fucking up the rest of the order. So yeah, just gonna have Sargent resting there in 20th place, where, well, he would have been anyway, probably. As Alex Albon is actually the first in the queue to get out of the pit lane and get out there on track. Yeah, cracking day it's turned into in Melbourne. And, well, if I didn't have a fear of planes, then it's definitely a city I would visit. Because it looks beautiful. Fear of planes is not the right way of saying it. Fear of heights. Uh, or not fear of heights. Well, that as well, but fear of flying, I think, is the best way of saying it, not fear of planes. But yeah, but the session has started. And yeah, Albon first on track. I'll sync up the timer in 20 seconds time. And yeah, Alex qualified 7th this Grand Prix a year ago. Was arguably his best qualifying performance of 2023. And they just showed a shot of Logan in the garage. And there you go. Timer on screen. Let me just adjust it slightly. Just hide text. There you go. As Albon's saying, there are a lot of leaves on the track. Well, that's always going to be the case, given that it is a street circuit. Albon is just coming into the final corner and now starts his first qualifying attempt. As he powers down into turn 1, Red Bull gets out of his way. Pretty good grip through turn 1. For Q1, though, the best lap time I'm expecting in Q1, given that the best lap time of the weekend so far was a 1:16.7, I think, in practice 3. I would expect the best time in Q1 to be about that, if not maybe a mid 1:16, like a 16.5. So, yeah. If you do a 1 minute 16, I think you should be definitely getting through to Q2. Put it that way. Albon comes up to the middle sector point. As all runs slightly wide on the exit at turn 10. That would have affected his time probably by a 1/10 of a second or so. Albon flings it through turn 12. And in terms of downforce and handling, the Williams looks good. It's just not, in this season at least, just not very quick on the lap times. Albon does do. Best time so far, but of course, the only lap time so far. So Albon up to P1. And we'll see what the others do. And yeah, just rear end instability. Again, it wouldn't have cost him a ton of time, but not great to have at that part of the track where you need the rear end to be perfect. As Magnussen and Hulkenberg go quicker. Pole position last year, by the way, was a 1 minute 16.9. So already in practice 3, they surpassed that lap time. So yeah, very hot pace this weekend. Much hotter than I expected. As Leclerc saying on the radio something about if we prepare something, don't quite know what that was about, as Alex Albon has had his lap time deleted for the track limit violation, presumably at turn 10. Bottas up to 3rd, Joe up to 4th. Max Verstappen goes quickest on a 1:17.4, which is an okay first run, but he'll need to go a bit quicker to make sure of his progress. Comes now Sergio Perez. Annoyingly, we're not seeing any of the sector time data in terms of who's going purple and that. I think one have fucked up their graphics a bit as Ocon goes to P5. Sergio Perez goes a couple tenths of a second slower than Max up to 2nd. As Gasly goes 6th. Lance Stroll, which has done a time, but it is a warm-up lap, 11 seconds off the pace. As we are now looking at A Ferrari coming to the end of their first lap in qualifying. Don't know what Ferrari it is. Looks like Carlos Sainz, I think. Yeah, I think it's Carlos Sainz because he's got the yellow T-bar where the onboard camera is. As he comes to the line. And yep, it is Carlos Sainz, and he goes quickest on a 1:17.2. Which is, yeah, already quicker than Ferrari were in qualifying last year, which was like a mid 1:17, as Leclerc goes even quicker by half a tenth over Carlos Sainz. As Lando Norris goes 5th, here comes Oscar Piastri, who goes 6th. So 2 by 2 by 2. Ferrari, then Red Bull, then the McLarens. And then the Haas's, 7th and 8th. Is a replay of Ocon running wide into the final corner and very close to the wall on the exit. The final corner. Yeah, did actually graze the wall. Yeah, definitely we need to give that car a check. And, oh, actually has a puncture. Just showing a replay of it now. And I don't know where Ocon is, but yeah, it looks... That tyre to me looked flat as he was trying to get out of the way of another car. So, bad start for Ocon. As I think Russell just completed... Or has he just started a lap? I don't know. Again, F1's graphics, for some reason, are all over the place. They're not showing lap times or anything, really. I mean, they're showing what the running order is, but they're not showing, like, the current, like, sector by sector or anything like that. As Fernando Alonso is now 7th. And Magnussen 8th. Lance Stroll is in 9th. With Hulkenberg 10th, and then Bottas, Gasly, Ocon, Zhou, and then everyone from 15th down hasn't done a lap time. And yeah, Russell's doing his lap, but we have no idea what the sector times are. So I can't tell you where this lap's going to put him. Albon does another lap, hopefully a clean, legit lap, and it only goes up to P12. With, though, only 4 spots up for elimination, because obviously Logan Sargent is out for the rest of the weekend, and obviously the 2 Alpines are going to be eliminated in Q1. Really, there's only 2 spots up for elimination, as Russell goes 13th only for Mercedes. 1:18.2. That is awful from Russell, as Lewis Hamilton goes 5th on a 17.7. I think I may have overestimated how quick the lap times were going to be in Q1. I think, yeah, probably a low 17 or a late 1:16 is probably going to be the best lap time in Q1. As Tsunoda now goes 9th. Good start to the session for him. As Ricciardo only goes 14th. As Lando Norris improves up to 3rd. Oscar Piastri replaces him in 3rd. So only a quarter of a second separating the top 5 right now. Then you've got Joe has just done a lap. And yeah, so in the drop zone right now, as Lance Stroll improves up to 5th place. In the drop zone right now, we've now Sergio Perez going 2nd. In the drop zone, Zhou Guanyu, George Russell in the Mercedes, Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, obviously Sargent out in 20th. As Fernando Alonso, what a lap time that is, a 1:16.9. That is a brilliant lap time this little into Q1, as Max Verstappen now goes 2nd, just ahead of Leclerc. Perez now up to 4th. Yeah, what a lap time that is by Fernando Alonso. Quarter of a second quicker than Max. That's a very, very good time, and I don't think really he'll need to do another lap. will Fernando in Q1. That should be good enough to get him through for the second part of qualifying, as there's a Ferrari on another lap. As now Carlos Sainz goes quick on a 1:16.7. Very, very quick. That definitely good enough to get him through to Q2. And I think Ferrari can probably park Carlos's car for the rest of the session. And now Leclerc's, as Leclerc goes second on a 16.9. As we're now looking at Pierre Gasly coming into turn 1, but this doesn't look like a flying lap to me. This looks like another warm-up lap. And yeah, clearly the team's having issues with warming up their tyres, even though it is, beautiful and sunny. They're just, having issues with the tyre warm-up, clearly. As looks like they've just done a practice or just a pit stop, basically, for Sergio Perez. As we're looking at, I think, Fernando Alonso, yes, who's being now wheeled back into the garage. And like I said, I think if he stays in the garage, I don't think he'll be eliminated from qualifying. Should be good enough. Not have to use another set of tyres for this session. But Mercedes, 9th and 17th. They desperately have to improve. And one of those people, George Russell, is now trying to improve. And looks like they've potentially got the sector by sector thing working. As good for, now they've got it properly working. So Russell, good first sector, half a second up on Albon, who's in 15th. Man, he needs to go quicker than to get through to Q2 for the moment. Now, about quarter of a second down on Sainz after the first 2 sectors. This is probably going to put Russell into, 5th, 6th place? Something like that. Lewis Hamilton behind him is actually on a better lap by a few hundredths of a second. As Pierre Gasly now on a much better lap. So, improvements coming. As Russell comes to the line. Loses a lot in that final sector. He lost, how much did he lose? He lost half a second, 0.6 of a second even, in that final sector. An incredible amount of time lost there. And he only went, as Lewis Hamilton now improves, he's only up, Russell, to 10th place. So Mercedes, 9th and 10th. 0.75 of a second slower than Carlos Sainz. That final sector, as I expected this weekend, because of all the high-speed corners and their awful performance through those high-speed corners, Mercedes are in big trouble today. As Pierre Gasly improves, only up to 14th. As Valtteri Bottas is now 13th. As Ocon stays in 19th. And, hold on, Gasly is ahead of Hulkenberg. Let's update that. As here is Alex Albon on another run. And 9 and 10, much better this time. Max Verstappen, by the way, has done a purple first sector. As Perez goes second with a new improvement. That should be good enough for him to get through. Max Verstappen does not improve his middle sector compared to his personal best, but he is 0.2 of a second up on Sainz's. As here comes Albon, who improves massively. What a lap! Goes from 17th up to 5th place. Incredible lap from Albon, and I think that might be, it probably will be good enough to get him into Q2, unless the track evolution is incredible. As Verstappen doesn't have a great final sector, and only goes third. Red Bull are lacking quite a bit in that final sector compared to Ferrari, which is certainly a surprise. I thought that's where Red Bull would really make the difference this weekend compared to Ferrari, but they're not. Here's a replay of Gasly failing to follow race director's instructions. He's going to be investigated after the session for crossing the pit exit line. Well, I didn't really get a clear angle of that because the camera broke up as he was doing it. As that is a replay of an Alpine getting all out of shape in the middle of turn 9 and 10, which you do not want to happen. But with 2 minutes to go in Q1, we have Hülkenberg, Ricciardo, Zhou, and Ocon, who are in the drop zone and have anything to do about it. As Daniel Ricciardo we're looking at. And his best time so far, Ricciardo, at 18.0. If Ricciardo can do a 17.5 or better, then I think Ricciardo will get through to Q2. But let's see if he can improve by that much. Into turn 1. Very good through there. And as I thought yesterday, through turn 1 and 2, that Racing Bulls car is very good. As Max on the radio says, still understeering too much, especially just the front tyres. They already look great, I think he said. As good first sector for Ricciardo. 0.2 of a second up on Gasly's first sector. As Bottas has done an improved first sector. Everyone is now. And Ricciardo, 0.5 up on Gasly after the middle sector. I'm not sure this is going to be a good enough lap for Ricciardo. Needs to really attack this final sector, I think, if he's going to get through to Q2. Through turn 11, looks good. Hülkenberg improves up to 15th. He's in for now, but only on a 17.9. I think Hülkenberg is at serious risk there of being eliminated. Magnussen, his teammate, goes up to P12. Here comes Daniel Ricciardo. And Ricciardo does a 17.4. Brilliant final sector up to 10th. And surely that will be good enough to get into Q2. Lance Stroll up to 8th. Valtteri Bottas 13th. Not sure if that's going to be enough. Lewis Hamilton doesn't improve. He might be at risk here. Zhou Guanyu stays in 18th. Horrible performance there by Zhou. So far off his teammate. Over half a second slower than his teammate there. So Zhou is out. As here comes Yuki Tsunoda in 15th. What can he do? He goes up to 7th place. Tsunoda into Q2. Esteban Ocon 15th. And I think Ocon may have just dragged that Alpine car into Q2 for the first time this season. Here comes George Russell. Only 6th. So Russell up to 6th. The session, of course, over. The checkered flag fell a couple minutes ago. And that is that for Q1. So let's go through your drivers that are through to Q2. Carlos Sainz, Sergio Perez, Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Fernando Alonso, George Russell, Alex Albon, great job by him, Yuki Tsunoda, Oscar Piastri, Lance Stroll, Lando Norris, Daniel Ricciardo, Lewis Hamilton, Valtteri Bottas, and Esteban Ocon. Great job by Ocon in an Alpine car that is absolutely terrible. And knocked out in Q1, Kevin Magnussen, Nico Hülkenberg, Pierre Gasly, Zhou Guanyu, of course, Logan Sargent not racing this weekend. And oh, hold on. Oh no! It's all gone wrong for the home Australian crowd and for the home Australian driver. Daniel Ricciardo has had his lap time deleted. And he is out. Ricciardo is now out in 18th place. Magnussen scrapes through. What a disaster. And Ricciardo has put in an absolute stinker there. That is exactly what he didn't need. Because he, did a really good lap, got into, into what was it, 12th place, got himself to Q2, and now 18th on the grid. There's nothing he can do from there for tomorrow. Disaster. But that is Q1 over and done with. So Hulkenberg, Gasly, Ricciardo, Zhou out in Q1. Zhou, by the way, was talking on the radio about how he picked up damage halfway through the lap at turn 10. So clearly that affected him. But Q2, guys, will be underway in 2 to 3 minutes' time. And I'll just get the timer ready. Obviously, 15-minute long session. I'll sync it up at the 14-minute mark. And let me just get this second dotted line and color thing ready. There you go. So, of course, anyone between those two dotted lines at the end of Q2 will be out of the session. But yeah, Albon and Tsunoda, great laps. Remember, especially Albon, that was an incredible lap time. A 17.1, I think it was. Very, very, very good lap time. And I think, honestly, after that, I think he could be a serious threat now to get in the top 10. By the way, just quickly, if you haven't already, smash a like button. We've got almost a couple hundred watching and only 60 likes. So let's try and get the likes up. Let's try and get up to 75, 80 likes, something like that. That'd be great if we could do that. So yeah, smash that like button. Lots of people going in on Ricciardo. Yeah, he's saying Ricciardo equals cards. Ricciardo would struggle to cook an IndyCar or supercars at this rate, says Crystal Racing. Looney Classics. Says Chazza, I think it's now clear Danny Rick does not deserve to go to Red Bull. He is done as top driver. Yeah, based on his current performance level, I think, yeah, I have to agree with that. Until he shows something different, he's not the Daniel Ricciardo. He is, yeah. I think you could argue, I think you could possibly say at this point that he is finished. I'm not going to say it yet because I still want to wait until we get to like a couple tracks where I know he's really strong. Monaco, for example. I mean, if we get to Monaco and Ricciardo is out qualified by Tsunoda and gets eliminated, like, in Q1, or it's just out qualified by Tsunoda by like a load of positions, then if that happens, I will come out on stream and say Daniel Ricciardo is finished and doesn't deserve to be in Formula 1. Trust me, I will say it. Miss Marquise says, I feel bad for Ricciardo, but I mean, it's all his own doing, isn't it? He did the lap time, but he didn't keep it within track limits. So, a disaster of his own creation, unfortunately. Danny Rick's Melbourne curse continues. I'm not sure I'd put this in the curse category, but yeah, not necessarily had the greatest results here in Melbourne. Sarah Garris says 2020 was the last Ricciardo's last good season. 2021 was the last Ricciardo-ish season. Yeah. I mean, if this is, the end of Daniel Ricciardo, let's be honest, it is sad. I know some people do take joy of it because, there is obviously still a consensus of people that believe that he's still good enough, and then there's a lot of people that, like to combat that by saying, oh, he's washed. And they, do have some justification for saying that. But, when you think back to how good Daniel Ricciardo was, it is sad because Daniel Ricciardo at his peak was such a good driver. Such a good driver. And there's a reason why we were all such fans of his. It's not just because of his, personality and his big smile. It was because, or at least for me, it was because, on track, he was such a great racer, one of the best overtakers I had ever seen, and at his absolute peak was performing right up there with the very best in Formula One. So yeah, it is sad to see. It is definitely sad to see. And I mean, who knows in an alternate universe how Ricciardo's career would have gone if he was in the right team at the right time. Because when he went to Red Bull, he went to them when obviously it was the wrong time because Red Bull were no longer competitive. So who knows what would have happened if Ricciardo was in a championship winning car back in those days. But enough of what if. Let's focus on the present. And it is now Q2. Q2 has begun. 14 minutes to go in Q2. And now time to find out whether we'll get some surprise eliminations in this second part of qualifying. I think Mercedes definitely are at risk here of having at least one car knocked out. I mean, you see there Lewis Hamilton and P12. Hamilton and Mercedes in general were not quick at all during that first part of qualifying. And if Albon and Tsunoda, if they can keep up their real strong pace, you just never know. As we're looking at Carlos Sainz on the soft compound tyre, starting his first run in Q2. And yeah, the best time in Q1 was a 16.7. So the best time we're going to see in Q2 probably will be a 1:16.2, 1:16.3. Yeah, if you can do a 1:16.5 or better, then that definitely should be good enough to get you through to Q3. It's got a bit of a slipstream there from the McLaren, which was a good helping hand. Carlos, who has never been on the podium here in Melbourne, and, well, hasn't even finished in the top 10 the last 2 Australian Grand Prix. Actually, last 3 Australian Grand Prix. 2019, he broke down early in the McLaren. 2022, he spun out. And last year, he got a penalty for taking out Fernando Alonso. So this has not been a good place for him. Let's see what he can do here. Very good grip through the final couple corners to the line. And it's a 1:16.6. That's a pretty good start to the session for Carlos. And yeah, just one more improvement on that, and that should be good enough to see Carlos into Q3. Ocon has gone second on a 1:18.8. Max Verstappen now goes quickest on a 1:16.3. That's a new marker laid down for the rest. As Leclerc only goes third on a 16.7. Quite good enough. As yeah, Ocon's done a 1:18.8. Not sure if they've got any tyres left or anything, but that's definitely not good enough. As Alex Albon is a 1:17.3. Not quite as quick as he was in Q1. As Lando Norris has done a purple first sector and is only barely slower than Max through the middle sector. So this is a very good lap by Lando Norris, who his best qualifying result here in Melbourne was in 2022, of 4th place, I think. As Sergio Perez is up to 4th. And here comes Lando, as Piastri's now done the purple first sector. Lando Norris, 4th he goes. Decent lap, nothing special. Here comes Lewis Hamilton. Can he go quicker than the McLaren at least? Here comes Lewis. And no, he can't. Only 6th. And, well, closer to Albon than he is to the front runners ahead. That is a bad lap time. As Oscar Piastri does a 1:16.6 and goes up to second place to the delight of the Australian crowd. The Piastri up to second. And yeah, Piastri, I think already with that lap time, good enough to get through to Q3. Fernando Alonso going to the end of a flying lap for him as Lance Stroll only goes 8th. Alonso only goes 9th, so pretty slow there from Aston Martin. Not quite sure why. Not that far ahead of the Williams of Albon. And here's a replay. Maybe they're on used tyres. Yeah, looks like that could be the case. Alonso sliding wide slightly through turn 1. Yeah, not the greatest beginning for Fernando. Here is Russell on his first flying run of the Q2. And Sonoda, I've just seen, has gone half a tenth slower than Albon, but is in P11. What can Russell do? Can he go quicker than his teammate? He does, but it's still not the greatest lap time. A 1:16.9. Yeah, Mercedes don't look good at all. As this is Magnussen on a lap, and he is currently quite slow. Doesn't look like he's going to improve, really, that much from where he is right now. He'll probably go ahead of Ocon and up to 14th, but that'll probably be it. Haas, unfortunately, just don't seem to have the pace to be in the top 10 this weekend. DRS is open for Magnussen. Comes to the line. And actually gets out of Bottas, so 13th. Good at least for Magnussen to out-qualify Hulkenberg. That is something for Kevin. But this place has always been good for him. Obviously, his first ever Formula 1 race. Still can't believe he did it. First ever F1 race in 2014, 10 years ago. In the McLaren, he finished second. What a drive, and what a weird career to have your best result in your Formula 1 history in your first race. Such a weird career for him. I've always liked him, though. I've always thought he's a very quick driver. Yeah, he's could be a bit rough on the edges, let's say. But, yeah, he's a proper racer. Someone I respect quite a lot. And I hope that, continue his racing career after Formula 1 to have some success in endurance racing, which he's got an interest in. As Carlos Sainz is on a new lap. There's a purple first sector, nearly 2/10 quicker than Max Verstappen. So let's see what Ferrari have got. This might be a mini preview. Pole position. Sainz to the middle sector. 700ths up on Max. So looking good. Now powers down to turn 11. And that Ferrari, I've not seen that Ferrari car look that good in terms of the amount of grip it's got in quite a while. Last year's car was nowhere near as good as this. As Sainz out of the final corner, to the line. And he does go quickest by 0.2 of a second. Or 1:16.1. That's definitely good enough to get him into Q3. Is Sergio Perez. Not improved his middle sector. The middle sector is not really that important. Really about the first and final sector in qualifying. I mean, yeah, the middle sector, is good for having a good top speed. You're quick through there, but first and final sector is really, really important. Here comes Sergio Perez. To the line. And he goes up to 4th place. And here comes Charles Leclerc. Can he go quickest? No, he goes almost 0.4 of a second slower than his teammate. And only into 3rd. Interesting. We're looking here at Esteban Ocon with 5 minutes to go. Understeering like a ferry through the penultimate corner. Alpine, absolute trash. 18-0 he does on that lap. Can't even get into the 117s in Ocon. Absolutely abysmal. As they're just showing on the broadcast, a quick stat that on this day, 21 years ago, Fernando Alonso started on pole for the first time in his career at the 2003 Malaysian Grand Prix. That was also that day where Kimi Räikkönen took his first victory in Formula One, I believe. It was so good, that victory from Kimi, it made Ron Dennis cry. You know, it was a good win if that happens. Alonso has not improved his first sector, so this is not looking good unless his middle sector can act like a rocket. And he has, because he's improved on what he's done. Just needs this final sector to go well. And really needs to get ahead of the two Mercedes cars, I think, with this lap if he's going to give himself a good shot of getting through. Fernando through the final couple corners. Alonso to the line. Yep, goes ahead of the two Mercedes up to 7th place. Only 0.03 of a second slower than Lando Norris with that lap. So, yeah, that's a decent run from Fernando. Here comes Lance Stroll, who's looked pretty good this weekend. Been ahead of Fernando a few times. Can he do it again? To the line he comes. And no, he improves his lap time, but he stays in P10. And he's only half a tenth ahead of Albon, so he might be in a bit of trouble, Lance Stroll, as he usually is on a Saturday. Silverback says, as I've been saying, Danny was washed for 3 years now. It's about time you understand it, Chazza. Trust me, like I said, if we get to Monaco and he's still like this, I will apologise to you and everyone who have been telling me for quite a long time. Notice Chazza is finally agreeing with me about something. As here is Lewis Hamilton on what is, with 2 minutes to go, going to be his final lap in Q2. Ran a bit wide at turn 3. Really, they need to improve by about 2 to 3 tenths of a second at least if they're going to be sure, I think, Mercedes of getting through to Q3. But Hamilton already 4 tenths of a second slower than Sainz after only sector 1. It is. I know, they haven't been great in the last couple of years, but it's still amazing to me how they're still this bad. Better in the middle sector, though, for Hamilton than Sainz was. So if he has a good final sector here, that might get him quite a few positions up. Let's see. Into the penultimate corner. And, oh dear, car oversteering like hell. And even a slight bit of oversteer. And Hamilton even puts his hand up to his helmet, probably thinking, fuck, this car is so bad. And he improves his lap time, but he only stays in 9th. And Hamilton definitely in trouble if Albon and Tsunoda can improve. Albon, we know he can, because he did a better lap time in Q1. As Kevin Magnussen to the line, only goes 12th, so Magnussen is out of qualifying. No surprise there. As we're entering the final 20 seconds now, here comes Valtteri Bottas, who won this race in 2019. As Alonso improves again up to 6th, he's definitely through. Here comes Bottas. Only 12th, Valtteri Bottas now out of qualifying. Ocon thankfully gets into the 117s, but Stays in 15th. Here comes Yuki Tsunoda. Can he get into the top 10? Yes, he can. He's up to 8th and ahead of Lewis Hamilton. So if Albon can improve, and Hamilton's into the drop zone because Lance Stroll has gone up to 8th and Lewis Hamilton is out in Q2. As Leclerc improves up to 2nd, Russell might even... Will Russell? No, because Albon's in the pits. I was going to say Russell might even get eliminated, but no. Lewis Hamilton out in 11th place. Is, I think, joint or one of his worst qualifying performances in Melbourne. He did start there in 2010, I remember. But wow, how bad. Hamilton asking, are we safe or not? Negative. Bono says we've just been bumped. The worst start to a season by far that Lewis Hamilton has and maybe will ever have was 9th in qualifying in Bahrain, 8th in Saudi Arabia, and now 11th in Melbourne. Incredible for the man who has the most pole positions in Formula One history. But that, guys, is Q2. Over and done with. Let's go through your drivers out in... not out in Q2. Let's go through the drivers that are making it through to Q3. Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, Oscar Piastri, Sergio Perez, Fernando Alonso, Lando Norris, Lance Stroll, Yuki Tsunoda. Once again, the lad does it. Gets it into the top 10, just like he did in Saudi Arabia. George Russell just about sneaks in. And then out in Q2, Lewis Hamilton, Alex Albon, Valtteri Bottas, Kevin Magnussen, and Esteban Ocon. And Q3 will be underway in about 3 to 4 minutes' time. Obviously, 12 minutes long. A shootout for pole. And this picture on screen from yesterday that you're seeing on my broadcast of Hamilton going across the gravel, that pretty much sums up his season. Just a complete shit show. I'm baffled. I'm absolutely baffled. I mean, last season, he finished, what was it? Was he 3rd in the championship? Was one of the top 2-3 drivers on the grid. And, it wasn't the best Lewis Hamilton season ever. It wasn't, it wasn't peak Lewis Hamilton, let's say. But I don't know what's happened. I mean, I know, obviously, this is his last year at Mercedes. He's going to Ferrari next year. And I know, of course, the car is not good. That's clear to see. But 3-0 to Russell now in qualifying. And Hamilton can't even get anywhere near the 3rd row of the grid. What on earth is happening? It's just baffled. Absolutely baffled. Red Robin says someone predicted Hamilton would end up outside the points. So I thought they were crazy. With the way Mercedes look at the minute, I mean, with Lewis Hamilton, I mean, probably he'll get into the top 10, but I could see Hamilton not going any higher than 10th tomorrow because he personally is not looking that quick and the car is pretty dire as well. So we're just seeing now and on board of his final lap in qualifying. I mean, it was clear to see what the issues were. The rear end of the car was not sticking. The car just had rotten amount of downforce. Constant not understeering, constant oversteering. Whenever he tried to put the throttle down out of a corner. Yeah, that car is just absolute wank. And I'll be honest, I don't think George Russell in this Q3, I don't think he's going to do that much better than P10. He will do well, Russell, to be 7th, I think. Never mind, getting anywhere near 5th. It's just, it is incredible. I thought there was no way after the last couple years they could get worse. Yet they have, Mercedes. It's, one of the biggest surprises of 2024, and I mean, we'll see how the next couple of races go. But if it continues at this rate, if they continue in this form, then I think we can just write off this year and next year for them. Because clearly, something fundamentally is wrong at this team, which I think we know now is probably the correlation issues from the wind tunnel to the track, which they're still suffering with, even a couple years later. But, yeah. And Ricardo, by the way, earlier, the track limit violation he did was on the exit of turn 4. But yeah, I'm just baffled out how Mercedes can continue to be this bad. Michael Panzer says Lewis already thinking ahead to next season. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe he is. Maybe he is. Maybe he's just tapped out and thinks, I'm not going to win a championship. Who cares about this season? Let me just, prepare myself for 2025. Maybe that's it. We don't know. But Laurie's saying meh, Mercedes. I mean, they've literally gone full circle. They've gone back to how they were back in like 2010, 11. They're now more like an upper midfield team than they are a front running team, Mercedes. They're definitely a lot closer to the midfield than they are to the front. I mean, you saw there in what you call it, in Q2, Mercedes, even with doing a couple laps towards the end compared to what Ferrari were doing, they still could not get even half a second, away from Ferrari. They were 7-8 tenths away. And pole position is probably going to be a late 1:15, like a 15:7, 15:8, something like that. Yeah, they could barely put a 1:16 on the board with Mercedes. Looney Classic says, Chaz, could it be Mercedes is not doing so well because they made diversity their number one priority in hiring process of engineers? I don't think there's any evidence for that. So no, I don't think that's the case. And as well, I think that'd be very hard to prove. But I don't believe that's the case. I think it's the correlation issues in the wind tunnel. Clearly, they're seeing stuff on the wind tunnel that works, but it's not correlating literally to the track. Other teams have had these issues. I remember Red Bull in 2017 had it for a few months. Other teams have these issues. Correlation issues happen all the time. But for a team like Mercedes, for it to happen for this long is unacceptable. As I said in my preview a couple of days ago. But the Q3 session, guys, has started. We're just 30 seconds in. And let's get into the fight for pole position between the Scuderia and the Bulls. As the Australian in this session, Oscar Piastri comes out of his garage. And if he can get, say, on the third row, something like that, or even better, he was in P4 in Q2, and that would be a great result for... there you go. 11 minutes remaining in qualifying. And let me just quickly finish up the poll in chat saying, Todd saying, Max with a high 114. If he does that, I will just end the stream immediately. If he does that. I asked you guys who will take pole position for the Australian Grand Prix. Just over 500 votes. Thank you guys for voting. And you guys just about have gone for Max Verstappen with 47% of the vote. Leclerc on 43%, and then Sainz on 9%. By the way, if you haven't already, smash a like button. We're on 69 likes. Let's try and get up to 80, 90 likes if we can. The next, 10, 20 minutes if we can. But let's see what these first times are like. I think, again, pole position is probably going to be a 1:15.7, a 1:15.8, something like that. So if someone can immediately put in a 1:15 something, that is a really good start to Q3, as Carlos Sainz, who was quickest in Q2, wants pole position. What a return from his appendicitis this would be. As Carlos through this run through the first sector, but he's completed it. And yeah, that Ferrari on rails this weekend. So nice to drive. I can clearly see it. No issues with the balance of that car. Perfect front end, perfect rear end. And through turn 9 and 10, perfect amount of grip for the Ferrari. And Carlos has done a purple first sector compared to Russell and Leclerc, so those two cannot match Carlos. We'll see what Leclerc's middle sector is like in a few moments. As Leclerc goes slower again in the middle sector. So this is very good from Carlos Sainz, who comes to the line and does a 1:16.3, which is decent, but not great. You're going to be getting on pole, as Russell does a 1:16.8. Definitely not good. As here comes Leclerc through the penultimate, now the final corner. And if this final set has been good enough, then he might be able to get just ahead. No, he goes second, a 1/10 of a second away. But Max Verstappen has done the purple first and second sector. 1/4 of a second up so far on Sainz. Will he keep it up to the line? We'll see in a moment. As here comes Oscar Piastri, having a bit of a wobble out of the penultimate corner. Tsunoda has just gone fourth. Piastri goes third ahead of Russell on a 16.8. Sergio Perez now does the purple middle sector. As here comes Verstappen. Can he take provisional pole? Yes, he can, by nearly 3/10 of a second, a 1:16.0. But importantly, I think that can be beaten, as Lando Norris goes ahead of Piastri and up to fourth. Perez now goes up to fourth. And the two Aston Martins staying in the pits. So clearly they've only got one set of tyres left and will go out pretty soon. But there you go. The first runs are complete. And it's Max on provisional pole by almost 3/10 of a second. And actually here is Alonso, who went through the gravel very quickly at turn 7. As Fernando saying, box, I lost the car at turn 6. So clearly he made a mistake and they were not trying to save tyres. But yeah, Max on provisional pole, Sainz in second, Leclerc third, Perez fourth, Norris fifth, Piastri sixth, Russell seventh, Tsunoda eighth, and then the two Aston Martins ninth and 10th. They have not done a lap time yet in Q3. And as I said, Max Verstappen 1:16.0. That's a good lap time, but I think it's beatable. I think Ferrari have got the ability to go quicker than that. So do not think it's over, because I don't think it is at all. As Piastri telling McLaren to check the left floor for damage. Clearly, he has run wide somewhere and wants check to happen. But at the minute, McLaren, third row of the grid. If they can secure that, that would be fantastic. Given how competitive it is with them, Aston Martin and Mercedes. As yeah, this is going to have a check now, and hopefully there's no damage to Oscar's floor. And yeah, I thought it, and yeah, he ran slightly wide at turn 10. I don't think that's going to damage the car. There is, though, turn 1 may have ran a bit wide here, maybe. And no, not really. Not at all. A bit of a wobble, but nothing serious. Yeah, let's see who's going to take pole. As Lance Stroll is on an outlap for his final lap in qualifying. Man on screen on our broadcast as well. Let's see what he can do. He's had a good session today, and even though I've had my criticism against Lance, I will admit he's had a good weekend. hopefully he can keep that up with this final qualifying attempt. As we've got 5 minutes remaining in qualifying. And yeah, they're just taking, I think they're just doing loads of checks. Oscar. And seeing if his car's okay. As there is Felipe Drugovich, Aston Martin reserve driver, looking over the old man's car. But he certainly doesn't drive like an old man. Still, he's aggressively throwing his car about like he was all the way back in the mid-2000s. Oh, a couple birds on the track. I've seen them about quite a bit. Hopefully, none of the drivers hit them. As here is Lance Stroll, who starts his final lap in qualifying. If Stroll can get up to 6th with this lap, I think that'd be a good lap. Doesn't mean he'll stay there, but I think that's the best he could probably do with where F1's out on lap time. So let's see, as he's coming through turn 4, now through turn 5, flat out, of course. And pretty good first sector. Only a 10.5 off Max Verstappen. I don't know why, but it's so weird to me this season, Aston Martin. They've been very quick in qualifying, but in the races, they've just not been quick at all. Of course, last year was the other way round. And if only they could keep up their quali pace, as Stroll had a bit of a wobble there through turn 9 and 10. If only they could keep up their quali pace in the race, I think they'd be probably, you could argue, maybe even third in the championship. As Stroll coming to the final couple corners. As a load of drivers on an outlap now. And Stroll going to get a bit of a slipstream from the Mercedes ahead. Lance Stroll only goes 8th, which is, yeah, not that good. But we'll see where his teammate ends up. And I thought he had quite a wobble in turn 9 and 10, and we're about to see a replay. And yeah, oh, brilliant save. Got a right swapper on in the middle, and he held it. Oh, very nice. Very, very nice. Massive moment, and he held it really nicely. But it did fuck his lap up. That would have cost him maybe enough lap time to be ahead of Russell. As what on earth has happened for Fernando Alonso? He's slowed down a lot into turn 1, and now he's warming his tyres up again. So I think, well, there is still enough time for him to do a warm-up lap and then do a flying lap. So maybe he has been told that, or he knows they can just do one final lap of warm-up. But here we go. Here are the final runs in qualifying. And here is the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. Can he take pole? As Max Verstappen is already on his final lap in qualifying. Can he take his second consecutive pole in Melbourne? Verstappen, purple first sector. Only slightly quicker than his best first sector, though. Not a massive gain for Max. What's Carlos Sainz doing? And even better for Sainz, 400ths quicker than Max. And actually, no, 500ths quicker than Max. As Piastri does a better first sector than he did before. As we're coming now to the final laps. Max Verstappen braking hard for turn 11. Sainz coming through turn 9 and 10. And just about getting it right. As Verstappen coming through the final couple corners, as Alonso has done a warm-up lap and he's now going to start his final run. Here comes Verstappen. Can he keep pole in Melbourne? He does a 1:15.9. Will that be good enough for Max Verstappen? Here comes Carlos Sainz. As Sergio Perez improves up to second. Carlos Sainz to the line. Goes second. Just not enough in that final sector. He didn't improve in the final sector. Oscar Piastri to the line. Goes 5th. also does not improve in the final sector. I think their tyres might be going off in that final sector. Here comes Lando Norris, who goes up to 4th. Ahead of Leclerc, who hasn't hit the line yet. Here comes George Russell. Russell stays in 7th. And Leclerc pits. Leclerc clearly made a mistake, and Leclerc is down in 5th. An awful end for the Monegasque, who will be starting in between the two McLarens. Lance Stroll stays in 8th. He's done another lap. Here comes Fernando Alonso. Can he improve on P10 as Tsunoda goes ahead of Stroll? What a lap by Tsunoda. Here comes Alonso. And Alonso gets it wrong and stays in P10. Awful end. Half a second slower than Stroll. Alonso having an awful end to qualifying. But in the end, Red Bull just too good. Max Verstappen takes pole in Melbourne. Carlos Sainz will be 2nd on the grid for the Australian Grand Prix. Sergio Perez 3rd. Lando Norris, great lap from him to get P4. Leclerc 5th. Where did it all go wrong? And like I said, I thought Ferrari could have improved and done better than what Max did originally with his lap. And I think Leclerc was more likely the man to do that. But yeah, for some reason today, Leclerc just has not been quite at it. So Leclerc 5th, Piastri 6th. Still a good position for Oscar at his home Grand Prix. George Russell 7th, disaster for Mercedes. Yuki Tsunoda 8th on the 4th row. What a star that guy is, as Leclerc, clearly made a big mistake through turn 12. This is showing a replay of it. Well, it wasn't a big mistake, but clearly he thought that he couldn't go any quicker, so he came into the pits. Tsunoda 8th, what a lap from him. Lance Stroll 9th, Alonso 10th, Aston Martin really poor. I think they could have done a lot better there, Aston Martin. And then knocked out in Q2, Hamilton, Albon, Bottas, Magnussen and Ocon. And knocked out in Q1, Hulkenberg, Gasly, Ricciardo, Zhou. Of course, Logan Sargent not racing. So there you go, guys. Qualifying over and done with for the Australian Grand Prix. And what I want to know from you guys now is, who did you think was driver of the day? So who is your driver of the day for qualifying in Melbourne? And your options for driver of the day will be Max Verstappen, Carlos Sainz I'll put, because I think he's had a good session. Lando Norris I'm going to go for. And Yuki Tsunoda. So there you go. In terms of who I think driver of the day is, let me just have a look at the gaps quickly, because I just want to see with Tsunoda how far off he was, the cars ahead, just to understand that quickly. So let me just have a quick look. And oh no, they're not showing at the minute. They're not showing it properly. How far was Tsunoda off? Let me try and look on the Formula One Twitter account, see if they've posted. No, haven't posted official results yet. Yeah, just give it a minute and I'll make my decision in a moment as to who I think driver of the day is. I just want to see how close Tsunoda was to the drivers ahead, because if he was really close, then I'd probably go for Tsunoda, to be honest. But again, congratulations to Max. But I think Ferrari could have done better today. I think Leclerc especially. Clearly, not as happy with the balance today as he was yesterday. Maybe it's the wind. I don't know, but congrats to Max, 1:59. It's great lap time, but I personally feel like Ferrari could have done better. and I think they could have definitely done a 1:59 as well. Also, Tsunoda 0.8. 0.8 away and was only a few hundredths away from George Russell. Hold on, let me just check. Formula One, see if got it. Gaps, no. But yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go Tsunoda, driver of the day. To put a Racing Bulls in 8th and to be only 8 tenths off pole and only like 2 or 3 tenths away from, like, you know, the McLarens, Leclerc, only just behind the Mercedes, I'm gonna go Yuki Tsunoda. I think he was yeah, driver of the day for today. Again, Max, great lap, but I do feel like Ferrari could have done better today. Yeah, I am quite disappointed in Ferrari because I think now with Leclerc back in 5th and Sainz in 2nd, no disrespect to Carlos, I just don't see how Red Bull can be now challenged for victory tomorrow. So yeah, disappointed because, you know, I'm not, you know, anti-Red Bull. You know, I have no problem if they win every race, but I want it to be a proper competitive battle for victory. And I don't feel like with Sainz on the front row, we get as much of that as, you know, if it was Leclerc, let's say. So yeah. But I mean, still an interesting grid. You've got obviously the McLarens in a quite high position, 4th and 6th. Mercedes out of position a bit, you could say, 7th and 11th. Tsunoda up in 8th. Aston Martin, obviously, can they improve on the 5th row of the grid? We'll see. We will see. But I think what I'm going to do is, for the next few minutes, read out your comments and see what you guys thought of qualifying. See what your initial reaction is. Laurie says, Leclerc not had a good day. Bubble Skyline, boring race, boring racing race then. Yeah, I think we really needed, again, no disrespect to Red Bull, we needed a Ferrari on pole. If we had a Ferrari on pole, I think that could have made for a, you know, a properly good race tomorrow. But with Max on pole and Leclerc being back in 5th, again, I just think it's going to be a bit of a cakewalk now. So yeah. Bartle Rome says a typical Leclerc mistake. Port is dead says, yes, Yuki P8. I promise it'll be Yuki P10 tomorrow. I said it's every race. I hope he does score points. He deserves it. He's, you know, this season, he's been in qualifying at least. He's been one of the best performers. You know, top few performers on the grid. So, yeah. Looney Classic says, unacceptable from Charles today. Really needs to get better. I mean, you know, the last few qualifying sessions he's had, he's, you know, been very, very strong. So this is, you know, a blip. It's not like the regular thing from him. Laurie says Albon, Bottas, Magnussen, and Ocon were decent. Not sure I'd agree with that. I think Ocon, probably out of that group, did the best to get himself into Q2. Laurie says, yeah, Max was the only who really delivered when it mattered. Yeah, there was a few disappointing laps there. Stroll and Alonso. Yeah, Oscar didn't quite deliver probably as well as he could have. Leclerc, obviously. So, you know, Max didn't have as hard of a fight for pole as it probably could have been. But, I mean, you know, he nailed the lap and the others didn't. So, you know, that's why he ended up on pole. He delivered. And that's what it's all about, delivering when it matters most. Laura says, actually, Russell was good again. I disagree with that. I mean, he wasn't bad. He put the car where, on performance, the car is at. 7th. Yeah. That's the best he could do. But I wouldn't say necessarily he was worthy of real mention, to be honest. Looney Classic says, but why do you think Charles is the best bet to challenge Max this weekend when he could not even beat Carlos? Based on this weekend, Charles has no pace to challenge Max. That's not true. If you look at yesterday, Leclerc was incredibly quick. He was, almost half a second quicker than his teammate, Carlos. So that's what I mean. I don't get why yesterday Charles was like amazingly quick, but now suddenly today can't even match his teammate. And the reason, with Leclerc, I think is a better bet to like Max is because Leclerc most of the time is better than Carlos. And I think Leclerc has more skill, or more of the skill needed to beat Max Verstappen. Carlos is a very consistent driver, but I'm taking Leclerc every day of the week when they're both at their peak. Hello to Gregory, by the way. Says hello, everyone from London. Just sun about to start rising in a moment. It's getting light where I'm at. Pod says Sainz working for a contract. He's not going to go easy on anyone. Yeah, his start to the season really is helping him in terms of where he could be for next year. Because obviously was really good in the Bahrain race. Apparently, though, post qualifying, Chris Medlin just tweeted this, that both Red Bull drivers were saying that the Ferraris look like a real threat to them in the race on Sunday. Perez adding they've changed their strategic approach heading into it. So, I mean, maybe Sainz will fight Max. I hope he does. I really hope he does, but I just don't think he will. Laurie Rastogi saying Leclerc has a higher pace ceiling. Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. I can find a couple more comments, and then I think I'll come to the end of the stream. I'm getting a bit tired because it's just past 6 a.m. here. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. I have. Did a good qualifying, and hopefully the race tomorrow is better than what we had in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, because I don't think I could take another Bahrain type race again. Looney Classic says Max is on a different level. There is no way he'll get beaten by Charles, even if Leclerc was on pole. The Red Bull was just not on it yesterday, and today they came back. No one is beating Max now. If Leclerc was on pole, I don't think I would agree. I mean, I think Max, will definitely win tomorrow. But if Leclerc was on pole, I think it could have been definitely a different story. Menace One the Goat says, watch Sainz let Max through in turn one. Maybe Carlos will do what he did last year. Maybe T-bone Max. You never know. We've had crazy first corners in Melbourne before. Laurie says, Sonoda's potential has always been there. In my opinion, flashes of brilliance from season 1. Mark Warren says, thanks for this. Watching in Vietnam, but my provider has dropped the sky. Could commentary this year, so good to hear yours. Thank you very much for that, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And just a reminder quickly, and let me just try and get this up. Yeah, tomorrow I will be live at 2 a.m. UK time. That is 2 hours exactly before the race starts in Melbourne. So make sure to join us for then. Nib will be on, I think, my co-commentator for the race as well. And we'll do the usual, 2-hour build-up, then watch along the race, go through the race, and then obviously, hopefully, a bit of a reaction afterwards. But I think, guys, I will bring things to a close. Let me just finish up this poll in the chat before I go, because sometimes I end up ending the stream before I go through the poll. So, there's been 73 votes, and I asked you guys, who is your driver of the day for qualifying in Melbourne? And 38% of you have gone for Max Verstappen, 34% gone for Carlos Sainz in second, Yuki Tsunoda third on only 19%. Bit surprised by that, but there you go. That's your opinion. And then 8% for Lando Norris. Thank you guys for voting. And like I said, I'll be back tomorrow very early, 2 a.m. UK time, for the Australian Grand Prix. Make sure to join us for that. And quickly before I go, again, make sure to subscribe for more content like this, because we do qualifying and race watch-alongs for every Grand Prix. Smash the like button before you go. Let's try and get up to 100 likes if we can. If you haven't hit the like button yet, that'd be great if we get up to that. And as well, make sure to check out my last recorded video on the channel about Lance Stroll, which I did a few months ago, which did really well. And there is a link below, and maybe a link in the chat as well, to my Discord server. Make sure to join that if you want notifications for when I go live, when I upload videos, and also when I make channel announcements in terms of like updates, content updates as to when I'm going to be doing this, when I'm going to be doing that, and you know, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, make sure to join the Discord if you want to be notified in the best way possible for that kind of stuff. But guys, that is it for qualifying in Melbourne, and until tomorrow at 2 a.m. UK time for the race and the race watch-along build-up and then the watch-along itself, it has been me, Azar HD. Goodbye.